Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is Frayed Truths in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 21. Tsunaide looks down at the open file on her desk, her mouth pulling into a frown. Her eyes flick toward the label on the corner of the folder. Uchiha, Itake. She eyes the faded ink for another moment, before turning back to the file's contents. She riffles through the papers in front of her, her scowl only growing more pronounced. She scans each mission assignment, each report, and by the time she's 2/3 through it, she has to resist the urge to throw the entire folder across the office. There has to be something here. There has to be. She continues to look through the folder, growing increasingly frustrated with each page she finishes. Each page closer that she gets to the end of the file. She doesn't know what she expected when she requested the file be pulled from their records, but all she's found is an average UMBU record. The missions listed in the file range from mundane to gruesome. Most UMBU records are dark and bloody, and Itake Uchiha's is no exception. His hands were soaked in blood long before he turned his sword against his own kin. She frowns as she reaches the end of the file, the last page, an official declaration of Itake's status as a missing nin. She leans back in her chair, closing her eyes and pinching the bridge of her nose. Nothing. There's absolutely nothing. Blindly, she reaches out and pulls a random sheet from the pile. It's a document dated about 6 months before the massacre, promoting Itake to a captain position. Danzo's signature is at the bottom, and Tsunaide narrows her eyes at it. So he promoted Itake himself, did he? It's not unusual. Danzo's power over UMBU used to be almost as great as the Hokage's. Still, something about seeing that signature makes her uneasy. You're playing a dangerous game, Danzo had said to her. She hadn't liked the tone of his voice one bit. She sits up straighter, pulling the file closer to her. She begins to go through it again, but she reads each page more carefully this time, taking in every word. It's possible she missed something. Maybe if she looks closer. The door clicks open. Tsunaide doesn't look up at the sound of footsteps, already knowing who it is from their gait. What are you looking at? Jiraiya asks. He looks down at the file on her desk, and a frown pulls at his lips. Itake's UMBU file? Why are you looking at that? Learn to knock, Tsunaide says, instead of answering. Jiraiya scowls. He plucks the current report she's holding from her fingers. Hey. Jiraiya. Seriously. His eyes scan the document before returning to her face. What are you doing? I doubt whatever answers you're trying to find are in here. Tsunaide reaches out, snatching the paper back from him. Well, I have to start somewhere, don't I? And who's to say there's not something here? Do you even know what you're looking for? Tsunaide purses her lips. It's embarrassing to admit, but no, she doesn't know what she's looking for. Not specifically. But this whole situation with Itake reeks of secrets, of shadows, and deceptions that seem to go far deeper than anyone knows, and she needs to get to the bottom of it. Danzo is connected to this. If it turns out he's wrapped up in the Akatsuki somehow, wrapped up with someone like Itake Uchiha. No, I don't know what I'm looking for, she admits. But there's something going on here. Danzo is involved in some way, I just don't know how. And until I can make Itake talk, this is all I have to go on. She trails off as something catches her eye, near the very end of Itake's file. She narrows her eyes on the dates listed on the reports. The last mission assignment is listed as being in the month of March. That's 4 whole months before the massacre took place. Why are there no other reports from between that time? This can't be right. UMBU operatives are given a constant influx of missions, especially members as skilled as Itake Uchiha. So why is there such a large gap of time unaccounted for? She leans forward in her chair, a frown at her lips. Jiraiya, look at this. She beckons him closer, pointing out the dates on the file. He looks down at them, then back at her, not getting what she's trying to point out. The massacre took place in July, Tsunaide tells him. But this file claims his last mission before he fled Konoha was 4 months before that. Doesn't that strike you as odd? Jiraiya frowns slightly, though he doesn't look convinced. Maybe he took time off. He never put in a request for leave, Tsunaide says. If he had, it would be in here. Then maybe some reports fell out of his file and were lost. It happens sometimes. Are you sure you are not trying to see something that isn't there? Tsunade grits her teeth, remembering Danzo's visit to her office. Remembering her talk with Itake. She knows she has no proof that there's something more going on here. But her instincts are telling her that she's stepped into something, and she knows better than to ignore them when they are trying to tell her something. I know it seems like I'm reaching, she says. But I know I'm on the right track here. I've never trusted a word that's come out of Danzo's mouth. I don't trust that man, either, Jiraiya says. You know that. But sometimes files go missing. It doesn't mean there's some kind of conspiracy. It doesn't mean there isn't, either. Jiraiya looks at her for a long moment. He sighs in resignation, inclining his head. All right, fine. What do you need me to do? Just keep an eye on him, Tsunade says. Keep me informed on his activities. Whatever he's up to. I've got a feeling it goes far deeper than we know. That night, after Sasuke wakes up from his coma, Kakashi dreams of red eyes. He dreams of a crimson sky and a street filled with bodies, a child curled up in the corner of a room. He dreams of a sword repeatedly stabbing him. He dreams of a boy in an umbu mask. He wakes with the feeling of blood on his hands, his heart pounding against his ribs. He walks to the sink and scrubs at his hands until his skin is raw. That morning, Naruto and Sakura ambush him on his way down the street. They demand that he let them see Sasuke, and they refuse to take no for an answer. Kakashi isn't sure it's the best idea, but in the end, he agrees just to shut them up. He's beginning to develop a serious migraine. They walk toward the hospital, taking the familiar path to Sasuke's room. Kakashi wonders how his student is doing. He hopes he's doing better than he was yesterday. He hopes, but he doubts it. What Sasuke's been through isn't the type of thing someone just shakes off. He remembers how Sasuke looked yesterday, pale and shaking, struggling to hold on to the present moment. The mix of fury and fear that Itake's name ignited. He thinks about the boy he saw in the genjutsu 7 years old and backed into a corner. He remembers what his student had said to him yesterday. I know how it works. I've been through it before. So he was right. Itake had used this same genjutsu on Sasuke before, during the massacre. Thinking about it makes Kakashi's jaw clench. Kakashi is a grown adult, and that same mental torture nearly broke his mind. Sasuke had been 7. It's a miracle he was still functional after that. Kakashi tries to parse out Itake's motives, and he's at a complete loss. I don't get it. He doesn't want Sasuke to die, yet he puts him under a genjutsu that had every chance of breaking his mind? It doesn't make sense. None of it does. Itake doesn't make sense. They reach the correct room. Kakashi turns to his students with a firm expression. Remember, no yelling. And no throwing yourself at him. The first part is aimed at Naruto. The second is for Sakura. Naruto scowls, but Sakura nods. We know, sensei. They forget his words the moment the door is opened. Sasuke. Sasuke-kun. Sakura throws her arms around Sasuke's neck immediately. Sasuke grunts slightly at the impact. I'm so relieved you're awake. Sasuke doesn't hug her back. But he doesn't shove her away either, which Sakura seems to take as a win. How are you? She asks, pulling back. Are you feeling better? I'm fine, Sasuke says. What are you doing here? Kakashi takes a second to look at him. There are dark circles under his eyes. He clearly didn't sleep at all last night. He's pale, too, paler than his normal pale. Obviously, we came to see you, Sakura says. We heard you woke up yesterday, but we weren't allowed to see you then. She turns around to glare at Kakashi when she says this. Kakashi holds up his hands. Don't glare at me. I was following orders. He looks at Sasuke. You sure you're doing okay? Did Tsunade check you over? She did. Predictably, he ignores the first question. Kakashi refrains from sighing. Everyone's been so worried, Sakura says. For a while, we weren't sure if you were going to wake up. It really scared me. Sasuke doesn't respond. Even Naruto missed you, she adds. Kakashi watches in amusement as Naruto's face flushes. Why I did not. Sakura looks like she's resisting the urge to roll her eyes. Boys, she huffs. She looks back at Naruto. Is it really so hard to admit that you were worried? I wasn't worried about that asshole. You were the one watching him sleep like a creepy stalker. This time, it's Sakura's turn to flush. Naruto. Kakashi shakes his head with a sigh. Clearly, they've completely disregarded his instructions not to yell. It's useless to try and quiet them. And if he's being honest, he's actually missed their childish bickering. Shut up, Sasuke mutters. Both of you are so annoying. Naruto huffs, crossing his arms across his chest. Unbelievable. You're still such a bastard. You know, I think I liked you better when you were asleep. Sasuke turns to Kakashi. When can I get out of here? He asks. Hey. Are you even listening to me? Sasuke doesn't even twitch, continuing to ignore Naruto completely. Kakashi pushes off the doorframe, finally entering the room properly. You didn't ask Tsunade-sama when she was here. Sasuke glares at him. When can I leave? He repeats. Kakashi sinks into the chair by his student's bedside. He studies Sasuke with a narrowed eye. There's an intensity to his expression that Kakashi doesn't like. It's the same as yesterday, when he demanded answers about his brother. Why so eager? You're not seeing Itachi, I hope you know that. Sasuke flinches, his hands shaking against the sheets. Emotion sparks in his eyes. I need answers. You can't stop me. Watch me, Kakashi tells him. You're not allowed to see Itachi. Those are the Hokage's orders, and I agree with them. He's being interrogated as we speak. I have a right to know. You do. But getting answers from him isn't your job. Sasuke looks at him furiously, his hands fists against the sheets. His breathing has sped up slightly, and there's something unfocused in his eyes. They've gone slightly vacant. Kakashi recognizes the look. He's seen it on the faces of dozens of shinobi. He's having a flashback. Sakura frowns in concern. Sasuke. Before Kakashi can warn her not to, she reaches out a hand to touch his cheek. Sasuke startles violently, and his Sharingan activates. He slaps her hand away. The sound echoes through the room. Sakura pulls her hand to her chest, her eyes wide. The two Tomo in Sasuke's eyes are whirling. There's a tense silence, and then Naruto yells, "Hey! Bastard, what the hell?" Naruto, Kakashi says, "Don't." He doesn't raise his voice, but there's enough steel in his tone that Naruto falls silent immediately. Kakashi approaches Sasuke slowly, bending down when he reaches him. He doesn't touch him. "Sasuke," he says. "Can you hear me?" There's a slight pause. Sasuke's eyes focus slightly, and he nods. "Good. Try to breathe." Sasuke does. It's a tense few moments, but the Sharingan fades from Sasuke's eyes, the red returning to its usual black. He comes back to himself, and Kakashi recognizes what looks like embarrassment on his face before his expression goes blank. "You okay?" Kakashi asks. He knows the answer is no. He also knows Sasuke will never admit this. "Fine," Sasuke says. "Back off." Sakura is still holding the hand Sasuke slapped away to her chest, though now she looks more concerned than she does hurt. Even Naruto looks worried, his previous irritation nowhere to be seen. "Sasuke," he whispers. Sasuke prickles immediately at the soft tone. "Don't look at me like that. Why are you even here?" Naruto draws back, clearly offended, and Sakura frowns. "Sasuke," she says softly, "you're our friend. We just want to help you." Something complicated flashes through Sasuke's eyes, a mixture of emotions. His jaw tightens, but he doesn't speak. Kakashi watches him, and tries to figure out the right way to approach this. He wants to know how his student is doing. But the moment he tries to pry into his feelings, he knows Sasuke will shut down and lock them out. He needs to do this delicately, carefully. "So, your brother, Naruto says. What's up with him? And then there's Naruto, who has all the subtlety of a large, blunt hammer. Sasuke flinches, his hands becoming fists. Sakura whips her head around to glare at him. Naruto. Naruto shrugs. What? He says he's fine. He says he doesn't want us tiptoeing around him. That's what I'm doing. He turns to Sasuke, asking, so, that genjutsu he put you under. What exactly was it? Sasuke is tense for a long moment. But to Kakashi's surprise, Naruto's words seem to help. There's no pity in them, no hesitance. Naruto's words are as direct as they always are, and Sasuke seems to actually respond to it. He still looks like he'd rather they all leave, but he looks less like he'd scratch their eyes out if they refuse. I don't know too much about it, he admits, his lip curling in a way that shows he's displeased. And I don't know how he managed to trap me in it for so long. But it's an extremely powerful jujutsu that's specific to only Itachi. It's called the Tsukuyomi. A look of realization flashes across Naruto's face. That's right. Tsukuyomi. That's what that shark guy with Itachi called it. Kakashi shoots Naruto a sharp glance. And you didn't think to mention this before? Naruto scowls. I forgot. He threatened to cut off my legs, you know. It was a bit distracting. Oh please, Sasuke says with a scoff. Distracting? More like you're simply incapable of remembering a word longer than 3 syllables. Hey. Are you calling me an idiot? You said it, not me. Naruto growls and makes a sudden movement to lunge. Kakashi's eye widens, and he catches the ratty fabric of Naruto's jacket just in time, holding the boy back. Naruto. Sasuke is still injured. He's pissing me off like it's his damn job. Naruto yells. All I've done is show concern for him, and he won't stop jabbing at me. Forgive me, Sasuke says. I wasn't aware I had to cater to your delicate feelings. Naruto attempts to lunge at his teammate again. Caught between them, Sakura squeals, pulling into herself. Naruto. She yells. What is wrong with you? Me? He's the one being a bastard. Kakashi sighs, realizing quickly that they aren't going to work this out themselves. And Naruto is right, Sasuke has been purposely goading him since they walked into the room. Kakashi didn't think much of it at first, because he knows Sasuke is in a bad place right now. And when he feels vulnerable, he's prone to lashing out in order to hide it. But Kakashi realizes now that it's only Naruto it's directed at. Sakura hasn't received the same treatment. And though he's clearly annoyed at Kakashi for not letting him see Itachi, he's still not showing him the same disdain he's showing Naruto. This isn't just Sasuke acting cold to hide that he's hurting. He's angry, and that emotion is being aimed at Naruto specifically. Okay, Kakashi says. Maybe the two of you should go. Let Sasuke get some rest. Sakura frowns. But we just got here. And what about you? I'll stay for a moment. I need to speak with Sasuke. Naruto huffs, crossing his arms across his chest. Fine with me. Kakashi waits until the two of them leave, Sakura lingering reluctantly in the doorway. He closes the door behind them, leaning against it and turning to face Sasuke. What was that all about? He asks. Sasuke's jaw tightens. What was what about? He snaps. Don't give me that. Naruto was right. I know that fighting is pretty normal for you two, but you started snapping at him from the moment he entered the room. Why? Sasuke is silent for a long moment. His head is bowed, his hair shadowing his face. Why was he after him? Oh, Kakashi thinks, realization immediately hitting him with that one question. Of course. Kakashi doesn't know much about Sasuke and Itachi's relationship from before. But he imagines that Sasuke must have adored him, a genius older brother, perfect in almost every manner. It's not too hard for Kakashi to imagine a 7-year-old Sasuke, looking up to his brother and constantly trying to prove himself to him. And despite Sasuke's absolute hatred for the man, that part of him hasn't gone away. Sasuke wants to kill Itachi, yes. But there's still a small part of him, deep inside, that is still that same little kid. vying for his brother's attention, desperate to get him to look at him. To have Itaki return after all this time, and dismiss him completely? To learn that he's there for Naruto? Kakashi can't begin to understand how much that would hurt. Kakashi bites the inside of his mouth. He doesn't know how to answer this question. He can't tell Sasuke the real reason the Akatsuki are after Naruto. But if he doesn't, then Sasuke is left feeling worthless. He remembers Itaka's voice when he looked into Sasuke's head. "You're not even worth killing." Sasuke is usually so confident, often bordering on arrogant. But where Itaki is concerned, he clearly has some deep-seated issues with his self-worth. And Kakashi can't do anything to fix it. He can't tell Sasuke about the Kyuubi. "I don't know," he tells him instead, hating himself as he says it. "I'm sorry, Sasuke. I wish I did." Sasuke bites his lip. His hands are shaking, and he fists them into his sheets. There's a darkness in his eyes, a deep hatred. It isn't the first time Kakashi has seen it, and it isn't the first time it's worried him. "What I said on the rooftop that day," Sasuke tells him, "I meant every word. I'll do anything to make it happen." Kakashi remembers Sasuke on that rooftop, the day they first met. He recalls the way the boy stapled his hands beneath his chin, the cold anger in his eyes. "What I have is not a dream. Because I will make it a reality." But he also recalls that 7-year-old child, curled up in a ball deep inside his own mind. He recalls the ice-cold fear that flashed through his eyes, before the rage hit it. Before he choked it down. There's a fury and a vengeance in Sasuke Uchiha. But beneath that, there's an irrational, implacable fear that even in the last circle of hell, Itaka will still have him by the throat. Chapter 22. Sasuke stares at the door, his hand shaking around the handle. His bare feet are cold against the floor. "Move," he tells himself, trying to force his legs forward. Terror paralyzes him, rises up in his throat and chokes him. "Move." He forces his foot forward. His hand appears in front of him, shaking as he pushes the door open. Something wraps around his lungs and strangles his heart. It explodes in his chest, and in a sudden burst of panic, he can move again. "Tio-san. Kaa-san." His mother and father are laying on the ground, their blood wet and dripping across the floorboards. His brother is stepping forward out of the shadows, his eyes cold and blank and dead. Some part of Sasuke's mind registers that he's been here before, that he knows this scene, has relived it over and over, enough for it to lose all meaning, but it does nothing to dull the panic in his chest, the horror, the confusion. He shakes his head. I don't understand." There is blood on Itaka's vest and emptiness in his eyes, and Sasuke doesn't understand. "Nii-san, who could have?" Pain rips through his shoulder, spraying the air with blood. The shuriken embeds itself in the wall behind him, and suddenly, his brother isn't his brother anymore. Instead, he's a stranger. He's stalking forward, and Sasuke is stumbling back, feet slipping in his parents' blood. There's a slash in Itaka's headband, and he's taller, and his gray uniform morphs into a black and red cloak. Sasuke's back hits the wall, but it's no longer his parents' bedroom. Everything is brighter, and the walls are beige, and a long hallway stretches in front of him. A hand wraps around his neck, purple-colored fingernails. He's lifted from the ground, held against the wall. Sasuke's heart pounds in his chest, and he can hear it in his ears. Cold terror drowns him, crawls up his throat, chokes him. "Nii-san." Itaka's nails dig into his skin, and his hand around his throat is like an iron brand. He leans in, his breath against Sasuke's ear. "Foolish little brother," he hisses cruelly. "You didn't really think I'd spare you, did you?" And Itaka's eyes are twisting, transforming, the three tomo swirling together. "Tsukuyomi." Sasuke bolts upright with a gasp, his heart racing. Red eyes are burned into his brain, filling him with terror, preventing him from catching his breath. He's sweating beneath the sheets of the hospital bed. He throws them off, sitting up and bending over his knees. He struggles to return his pulse to normal, to slow the gallop in his heart. The pattern of Itaka's mangekyou is like a brand on his eyelids. It makes his heart feel like it's wrapped in wire string. "Tsukuyomi." Sasuke chokes on the word, on the memory of helplessness. Itake's hand around his throat like a noose, cutting off his air. Holding his life in his hands. So delicate. So fragile. So pathetically weak. His hand moves to the curse mark on his neck. He digs his nails into it, feeling the power pulsing just beneath his skin. You're still too weak. You don't have enough hatred. Sasuke turns his head to look out the window. The sun is only just rising, bathing the sky in a lovely orange. The orange morphs into a bloody red, and Sasuke blinks his eyes. The red goes back to orange. Foolish little brother. His hands shake in the sheets, and he thinks about that man, only blocks away. And suddenly, he is pulsing with anger, with desire, and he can't stand to sit idle for another minute. Not when his goal is so close in his reach. Not when that man is right here. He's here. He's right here. Sasuke stands up. His chest is burning with a sudden, desperate need. Hate me, despise me, kill me, and it pushes him up. Red eyes and the memory of blood, blood, blood. A brief flash of Itachi looking down at him, something glinting on his cheeks, tears. A gentle touch to his face and whispered words, so sorry I ever did this. It's all washed away by the memory of blood. A hand around his neck and a voice at his ear. You're pathetic, Otauto. Sasuke clenches his teeth, his palms stinging from the bite of his nails. That man is sitting locked up only blocks away. And Sasuke needs to see him. He needs answers. He knows Kakashi told him he isn't allowed. He knows he isn't supposed to. Hokage's orders. He doesn't care. Why would he help me? Why would he wake me up? Why would he leave me alive? Why didn't he just kill me? Everyone's been trying to tell him that they understand. They all say that they know how he must be feeling. But all of it is bullshit. Let everyone they love be killed in front of them. Let it happen by the hand of the person they trusted most. Let that same person discard them like garbage, then torture them for the sake of amusement. Let them see blood, and death, and red eyes whenever they fall asleep. Then, and only then, will Sasuke allow them to say that they know how he feels. There are Umbu stationed outside his window, but they're there to keep people out, not to keep him in. He opens the door and leaves the room, and no one makes a move to stop him. Sasuke remembers slipping out of the hospital, when he woke up after the massacre. He's hit with a sudden sense of déjà vu. He's the only one who survived. But he had an older brother, didn't he? Yes, but no one knows where he is. It takes him no time at all to make the walk. The prison is located near the Uchiha district. Next to the old headquarters of the police force. Sasuke takes the familiar path he takes every day to get home. He's passing the entrance of the compound when his breath leaves him. All it takes is seeing the familiar gate, and everything from the Tsukuyomi floods back in vivid color. Bodies littering the streets, twisted expressions frozen in fear. Blood splashing across the grass, the windows, the floor. Screaming. His father's eyes, his mother's cry, blood, blood, blood. Sasuke chokes. He spins away and speeds up his steps. He speeds past the police headquarters, empty and abandoned. The prison is just behind it. He steps inside. A man stops him, a familiar man. He has scars on his face. Sasuke remembers him. He was the proctor of the first stage of the Chunin exams. Ibiki Marino, head of torture and interrogation. Kid, he snaps. What the hell do you think you're doing here? Sasuke refuses to be intimidated, and also refuses to admit he jumped when Ibiki appeared. I want to see my brother. Ibiki snorts. You're kidding, right? Absolutely not. Have you been able to get any information out of him? Sasuke takes the man's silence as a no. Let me talk to him. Truthfully, Sasuke doubts he'll get anything from Itachi. Certainly not anything Itachi doesn't want to tell him. But if he can just speak to him. Ibiki considers him for a moment, his jaw locked. His face is like stone. Finally, he inclines his head slightly. Fine, he says. But there are cameras. I'll be watching them. I can pull you out at any time. Sasuke is escorted to the correct cell block. He stands there for a moment, outside the interrogation room, not moving. Then he forces his arm to move, forces the door open, forces himself to step inside. Itaka turns to look at him with familiar dark eyes. The room falls away. There's a hand around his throat, pressing him against a wall. Itaka's hair is brushing against his cheek, his breath against his ear. Sasuke can't breathe, and Itaka's eyes are twisting, and the entire world is red red red. Foolish little brother. He bites down hard on his cheek, the taste of blood filling his mouth. He comes back to himself, and Itaka is staring at him. Well, he says impassively. His voice sends a shiver down Sasuke's spine, threatens to tip him back into the abyss. If you wish to kill me one day, in hatred and revenge. Itaka's eyebrow is lifted in question. He's said something, and Sasuke has missed it. Sasuke steps up to the table, pulls the chair out, and sits down. He forces himself to look at his brother, swallowing down the panic choking him. Itaka, he says. Are Itaka's eyes red right now? Or is he just imagining it? Sasuke, Itaka returns evenly. His wrists are padlocked to the table, the metal cutting sharply into his skin. Sasuke's own hands are shaking. He hides them in his lap. Why did you help me? He asks. Why not just let me stay trapped in your Tsukuyomi? Let me lose my mind. Itaka sighs, as if this line of questioning disappoints him. What are you expecting, Sasuke? A brotherly declaration of love? I helped you for the same reason I left you alive that night. You already know the reason. Itaka's voice from 5 years ago echoes in his head, clear as day. You will be the third person, including myself, to have gained the power of the Manga Kyushari Nan. Sasuke grinds his teeth. The memories flash in front of his eyes, and it's a fight not to fall back into them. So I can become stronger. So you can have a worthy opponent to test your strength against. Itaka shrugs. You're pathetic as you are now. But you have the potential. There's still time. A memory flashes in front of his eyes. Staring up at the night sky from his sleeping bag, Itaka laid out next to him. You will surpass me? Impossible, Sasuke said. You're really gifted. Everyone says so. Itaka smiled, the stars reflected in his eyes. You're a lot like me. You have the potential. Sasuke clenches his hands, his eyes feeling hot. He hates this man. Hates him for abandoning him, hates him for wounding so many others. Hates that he used to love him once. Hates that a part of him still does. Sasuke closes his eyes. Tears threaten, and he refuses to show them in front of this man. What happened that night? He says, I was so young. I wanted so desperately to believe it wasn't real. That I was trapped inside a horrible genjutsu. Itaka's expression is unreadable. In the face of Sasuke's obvious pain, he doesn't bat an eyelash. We all live inside the fantasies we create. What is the point of this, Sasuke? Sasuke looks him straight in the eyes, ignores the way his fucked up brain causes them to flash between black and red. Back on that night, you mentioned the existence of another Uchiha. Someone else, other than you, who possesses the Manga Kyushari Nan. Whoever that man is, was your accomplice. They helped you wipe out the clan. Finally, a reaction surprise flashes clearly through Itaka's eyes. He's quick to recover himself, his face smoothing back into that expressionless mask, but the single second was enough. Accomplice. Itaka repeats. What makes you believe such a thing? You're strong, Sasuke says. Even at only 13, you were the strongest person I knew. But the rest of the Uchiha were strong, too. The strongest. Even you couldn't take them all out on your own. Itaka doesn't respond, just gives him a long, thoughtful look. Sasuke clenches his teeth at the silence. Well. He says. Am I right? Itaka is silent, unmoving. Then, his lips curve up into the slightest smile. He closes his eyes and leans back in his chair, tipping his face up toward the ceiling. I didn't expect you to figure it out so soon. But then, you've always had a habit of surpassing my expectations. Sasuke scowls at the painful surge of pride the words invoke the part of him that, after everything, still seeks his big brother's approval. I figured it out years ago, he says. I just needed you to confirm it. Itaki raises an eyebrow, pulling lightly at the restraints around his wrists. And now that I have. Who is he? The other Uchiha. For a moment, Itaka seems to actually consider answering him. Then he shakes his head. No, he decides. It's too soon for me to tell you that. Sasuke feels himself splinter. Visions of blood flickering in the corners of his eyes, he's hit with a sudden burst of hatred. The intensity of it steals his breath. He stands abruptly. Itaki actually looks startled at the violent movement, but Sasuke is too angry to feel satisfied. Why are you doing this to me? He says. All of this. Saving me, torturing me, does it give you some sick sense of amusement? Telling me to kill you, to get stronger. He freezes. It feels like he's been hit with ice water. If you wish to kill me one day. That's it, isn't it? Sasuke realizes, shaking from the realization. You want to die. Itaka's face shuts down immediately, like shutters on a window slamming closed. Sasuke feels like the floor beneath him is crumbling. No, he thinks. No. Hate me, his brother told him that night. Find me. Kill me. And that's why you left me alive, he breathes. It wasn't about me. It was never about me. You just wanted. It can't be true. It can't be. He can't have been left alive just for this, a tool to manipulate, to mold, to use. You're still too weak. You don't have enough hatred. 5 years. He's spent 5 years living only for the goal of killing Itaki. That's what he's lived every day in pursuit of. To become stronger than him, to beat him, to make him pay. But how is it winning if it's what his brother wants? How is it revenge if it doesn't make him hurt? Sasuke's hands shake. The memory of blood flashes in front of his eyes. Is that really all I am to you? He demands. Just some sword to use? To manipulate into giving you what you want. He doesn't know why he's surprised. He shouldn't be. Itaka laid it out to him before, didn't he? He told him that night, plain as day, just how little Sasuke's life was worth. That's why I'm allowing you to live. For my own sake. He can feel himself beginning to fracture. There's something building in his chest, something awful and splintered, and his eyes feel hot again. Tell me it was more than that, Sasuke begs. Tell me I'm more than that. It's stupid. It's stupid and desperate and pathetic, but still, after everything, he can't help that small part of himself. The part of him that, after all this time, still refuses to believe his brother's love was a lie. Tell me that there's something else. Tell me there's another reason. Itaka looks at him, and his eyes are the same as that night. You're nothing to me, he says. Sasuke feels the impact like a chidori through the chest. Itaka's eyes are dead, and Sasuke. 4 words. That's all it takes to shatter him. You're nothing to me. Sasuke can't breathe. He's heard iterations of the words before. You're not even worth killing. He hears it in every dream, every breath. It shouldn't affect him. It shouldn't hurt. But God, it does. You're nothing to me. The thing in his chest crawls up into his mouth. It's so heavy that his throat goes tight with it, and suddenly he can't draw enough air into his lungs. Loud noise pounds in his ears. It feels like the walls are closing in on him, like his arms and legs are cramped in on each other, and his brother's eyes are red. The moon is red, and so is the floor, and so are his hands. Foolish little brother. He can't breathe, he can't breathe. You're a coward, Itaki Uchiha, he chokes out. His body is shaking. I hope you get exactly what you want. If Itaki reacts to the words, Sasuke doesn't see it. He spins around and out of the room, slamming the door behind him. His insides feel like broken pieces of glass, shifting and shredding up his lungs. His mind is shutting down, shriveling up like a fruit left to dry in the sun and retreating back into his body. Down. You're nothing to me. His legs weaken, and suddenly he's not standing anymore. His knees are drawn up to his chest, and his lungs burn, and his vision goes fuzzy. The moon is red. The floor is red. his hands are red. I'm dying, Sasuke thinks, clutching at his chest. I'm dying, I'm dying, I'm dying. He tucks his head between his legs, gasping. Tears prick at his eyes, and the ugly thing clawing in his chest refuses to go away, and there's no air, no air, no air. And in his head, Itachi is smiling. In his head, Itachi is laughing, is carrying him on his back, is poking him on the forehead, is slicing through their parents' necks. You're nothing to me. Sasuke buries his face in his knees and cries. The door to the room is thick. But not thick enough to block out the sound of sobbing coming from the other side. Itachi's heart twists in his chest as he hears his brother break down feet away from him. He wants to cover his ears, to block the noise out, to pretend he doesn't hear it. Instead, he sits still in his chair, his hands curled into fists, and forces himself to listen. You're a coward, Itachi Uchiha. Because he deserves this. Chapter 23. No one deserves to be alone like that. No one should suffer that much. Naruto thinks about those words as he sits in the grass, the words Iruka-sensei said to him that day, when he risked his life to save him. No one should suffer that much. Naruto thinks about those words, and for some reason, they make him think of Sasuke. He twists a blade of grass around his fingers, pulling it up from the ground. He digs his nails into the soil, and thinks about a boy sitting at the end of a dock. He thinks about walking past that dock each afternoon, glancing down and seeing him there. No one deserves to be alone like that. He always knew that Sasuke was alone, just like he was. But he never understood how, not until Itachi Uchiha came crashing into the village, his existence like a roadmap leading straight into his teammate's heart. No one should suffer that much. Naruto knows he overreacted yesterday, when they went to go visit Sasuke at the hospital. He hadn't meant to lose his temper the way he did, especially when it was clear that Sasuke wasn't alright. But Naruto went there to show his honest concern, and all he received for it was insults and belittling remarks. But he shouldn't have been so quick to react. He sees that now. He sees that his best friend is suffering even if he doesn't understand how. No one deserves to be alone. He understands that Sasuke feels like he's still alone, even though he's surrounded by people. He understands how it feels to be alone so long, that sometimes you don't even realize when you no longer are. Sasuke is pushing them away. With harsh words and cold glares, Sasuke is building a wall between himself and the rest of the world. But Naruto won't let him. They both know how it feels to be alone, and Naruto won't let Sasuke suffer it willingly. He thinks about the curse mark on Sasuke's neck. He thinks about the purpose of it. He thinks about the hands that wrapped so mercilessly around Sasuke's throat, the screams that were torn from his lips. He thinks about how weak Itachi Uchiha made Sasuke look, and he feels a cold fear in his heart that refuses to fade. Because what if Sasuke refuses to let them help him? What if he goes to someone else instead? Naruto clenches his jaw, pulling more violent at the grass beneath him. Ugh, he says. Stupid Sasuke. Jiraiya looks up from his magazine at the noise. Hey, he says. What did that poor patch of ground ever do to you? Naruto huffs, throwing the grass he ripped from the ground up into the air. He falls onto his back, staring up at the clear blue sky. Pervy Sage, he says after a moment, that Orochimaru guy was your teammate, right? Jiraiya's hand freezes on the page. Sensing the serious tone to the blonde boy's voice, he pulls his gaze away from scantily clad swimsuit models. Yes. He was. Naruto twists blades of grass around his fingers, still looking up at the sky. Why did he desert the village? The inquiry is clearly unexpected. Pervy Sage frowns, a crease appearing between his eyebrows, and for a moment, Naruto thinks he isn't going to answer. Maybe he doesn't know. Orochimaru's parents were killed when he was very young, Jiraiya says. They were both shinobi of the leaf. Orochimaru became obsessed with power after that. Perhaps he wanted to find a way to bring them back. Or perhaps he harbored resentment toward the village for causing their deaths. Naruto frowns when he hears this information. His parents were killed, just like Sasuke's. Jiraiya looks over to him with a frown. Sasuke? Is that what this is about? He pulls at the grass, chewing on his lip. I'm worried about him. Did you know Orochimaru gave him a curse mark? Jiraiya nods with a grave look. Yes, I heard. In the Chunin exams, right? Naruto nods, biting his lip. He wants Sasuke. I'm not sure why. And Sakura-chan said he seemed so sure that Sasuke would go to him. And you fear that it's true? That Sasuke will be tempted. Naruto doesn't want to consider it. Sasuke would never go to Orochimaru, not to the man who attacked Konoha and killed the third Hokage. But he thinks about how easily Itachi halted his Chidori, how effortlessly he beat Sasuke down, and he worries. Sasuke is strong. Naruto's always wanted to be as strong as him. But if Itachi Uchiha is his goal, then Sasuke is hilariously outmatched. He wants to beat his brother, Naruto says. To be strong enough to kill him. Revenge, Jiraiya says. He sighs. Your friend has a lot of anger in his heart. A lot of darkness. Orochimaru will try to use that. He'll try to take advantage of it. Naruto pushes himself back off the ground, turning to look at the Sennin. So then, you think he'll leave, then? It's hard to say, he replies. On the surface, he and Orochimaru appear to share slight similarities. But Sasuke appears to consider you a comrade, at least. He has a tie with you. I don't know if Orochimaru ever felt the same. Naruto nods at this. Despite Sasuke's cool, often detached exterior, deep down he considers his teammates to be his comrades. Naruto knows from the way he pushed himself to his feet in the forest, prepared to fight Gaara even knowing it meant his death. I never want to see that again. My precious comrades falling, right in front of me. Sasuke might never admit it out loud, but Naruto knows he considers them friends. Still, Jiraiya says. Do not underestimate Orochimaru. He can be very persuasive. You should keep your friend close. Make sure you're there for him. Jiraiya looks down, flipping at the pages in the magazine. He's never been the best at advice, so he leaves it at that. Instead, he refocuses his attention on the scantily clad bikini models in front of him. Were you there for Orochimaru? Jiraiya pauses at the question, his mind drawn quickly from his fantasies. Something twists in his chest that feels vaguely like shame. No. I wasn't. Do you think it would have changed anything? Naruto asks. If you had been. Jiraiya thinks of a small face streaked with tears, staring down at a grave. Why does death have to happen, sensei? He thinks of serpentine eyes, glinting by the light of the campfire. I want to master ninjutsu. And become stronger than anyone. Jiraiya bows his head. There's a grief in his heart that he rarely allows himself to feel. I don't know, he replies. Maybe. His eyes go unfocused, lost in memory. Lost in the dozens of instances where he could have offered his teammate a hand, but had chosen instead to ignore the darkness in his eyes. Could I have helped you? Or is this the person you were always meant to become? Jiraiya frowns, tapping at the page in front of him. Across from the training field where the two of them are sitting, a man with bandages and a walking stick walks by. Jiraiya's eyes sharpen, and he is immediately alert. Danzo, he thinks, with a furrowed eyebrow and suspicious eyes. Where's he going so late in the afternoon? Reluctantly, Jiraiya closes his magazine. He stands from the ground, brushing the grass from his lap. Sorry, kid. But I gotta go. Naruto looks at him incredulously. What? Just like that? Pervy Sage, we were talking. He shrugs, his gaze locked on Danzo's disappearing figure. Sorry, Naruto, he says, throwing the words over his shoulder as he leaves. But it's important business. We can pick this up later. Naruto huffs as the man scrambles away. Important business. He scoffs, yanking up the grass again. Yeah, right. He's probably just going to spy on the ladies' bathhouse again. When he hears the scrape of the door opening again, so soon after his brother's departure, Itachi is quick to recompose his face. He is expecting Ibiki, back for another round of mental torture. Perhaps the Hokage. He is not expecting Danzo Shimura. His shoulders tense the moment he recognizes the man. His right side is completely wrapped in bandages, his visible eye sharp on Itaka's face. Itaka holds himself still, his face forcibly blank. Danzo pulls back the chair that Sasuke vacated less than an hour ago. Itaka has to fight against his anger when he finds himself looking at the man at the bandages covering his right eye. Shisui's eye. Itaka, Danzo says cordially. Forgive me that it took so long for me to stop by. I admit, I was surprised to hear that the attempt to capture you had been a success. I hadn't expected such carelessness from you. The vision in his right eye is still blurred from his use of Amaterasu. Itaka is certain now that it is permanent. Danzo's features are slightly hazy to him, but no less detestable. Danzo clearly suspects the truth behind Itaka's capture, that he let it happen willingly, to wake his brother. Otherwise there would be no need to bring it up. Sure enough, he continues by saying, this was unwise of you. You have risked everything by allowing yourself to fall into Konoha's hands. Itaka wishes he could disagree with him. But he can't. He can feel his years of planning unraveling around him, as he tries desperately to hold all of it together. It's been taking every bit of his will to resist Ibiki's mental interrogations. He thinks if he has to suffer through one more session, it might be the one where he finally breaks. He glances up at the cameras placed in two corners of the room. He doesn't think they record sound, at least, they didn't 5 years ago, but that could have changed. And most intelligence operatives are trained to read lips. He keeps his chin low when he speaks, his bangs falling into his face. I have it handled. It doesn't concern you. It concerns Konoha, which automatically makes it concern me. Any truth that you tell that you are forced to tell risks the stability of this village. You're risking yourself by being here, the Akatsuki member points out. He shoots a pointed glance at one of the cameras. I will do what I must, Danzo tells him. Even if I must bear suspicion. What you must, Itaka repeats, and his hands are clenched so tight that his nails draw blood. You mean like with the Uchiha? The Uchiha's fate was decided. You know this. It was the only option. Itaka bites down on his tongue. It was only the only option because you made it so. If you hadn't killed Shisui. I killed Shisui. Danzo says. Funny. I was under the impression that it was you who did that. Itaka's heart twists at the reminder. Shisui holding his eye out with a trusting smile, his body tipping backwards, a sharp pain in his eyes. There was a plan in place, he says, banishing the old images from his mind. The situation was going to be resolved peacefully. You sabotaged that. Danzo's mouth twists, pulling at the scar on his chin. Do not be naive, Itaka. There was never any hope for a peaceful solution. Even if Koda Amatsukami was used to make your father back off, what did you think would happen? That the rest of the Uchiha would simply obediently fall in line. Itaka's jaw clenches. He hates that a part of him thinks this man is right. Even if Shisui had succeeded in changing Fugaku's mind, the rest of the clan would never have stood for it. It was a risk, he allows. But that doesn't mean it couldn't have worked. No, the bandaged man tells him. What was a risk was leaving your brother alive. If the truth of what happened to the Uchiha comes out, he will become a threat. Itaka tenses at the threat in the words. He remembers Danzo's words clearly, the night he gave him the choice of killing the clan, he will develop a vengeful heart towards the leaf. And then, unfortunately, he will have to die as well. He grinds his teeth. He's calculated the possibility of Sasuke discovering the truth, he has contingencies in place for this, as well. If Sasuke ever discovers the truth and turns against Konoha, then Itaka will simply use the Eye Shisui bequeathed to him. But Koda Amatsukami is his final card, not to be used unless absolutely necessary. And he will not let it be known to Danzo, who already has one of Shisui's eyes, and would no doubt love to own a matching set. Sasuke is a child, Itaka tells him. He's no threat. He's no younger than you were. Hardly a child. It's safer to simply kill him. Correct the mistake you made that night. We had a deal, Itaka hisses. His voice is a bit shakier than he feels comfortable with, but he can't seem to steady it. You promised he would be kept safe. I promised, says Danzo, that he would be unharmed in the culling of your clan. I said nothing of his safety afterwards. It was Hiruzen who guaranteed you that, and he is dead now. Yes. He is. But I warned you, go near my brother, and I will leak classified intel to unallied nations. You did warn me, Danzo agrees. But I don't think you'll really go through with that threat. If you leak that sort of intel, then that will put Konoha in danger. And I don't think that's something you're willing to do. Not when you've already gone so far to protect it. Itaka clenches his hands in the metal restraints. He can feel the blood of every Uchiha on his skin, forever not washing off. I killed them to protect my home. I let you live for that same reason. But if you think I would ever... I think, if it meant keeping Konoha safe, then you would sacrifice anything. Even your precious little brother. Itaka draws back. The words are like a sharp slap in the face. Do not be offended, Danzo says. This world is in need of more shinobi like you. Only those who are willing to sacrifice everything will be able to bring about real change. Itaka's hands are shaking. He feels sick to his stomach. With just a few words, this man has managed to strip him of his defenses more effectively than any of Ibiki's mental interrogations. Touch my brother, he says, struggling to regain his composure, and I swear, I'll... You will do nothing. I've already called your bluff. Danzo has wrestled control of this conversation, Itaka realizes. He's twisted it out of Itaka's hands, and it's too late to try and gain it back. He feels like he's 13 again, being ensnared in the threads of those around him. He has no power here. He is a child, helplessly tangled in strings of manipulation, and the harder he fights the more they restrict him. You will run, Danzo tells him, before they get a single piece of intel out of you. The truth will remain hidden, and there will be no reason for your brother to be touched. Konoha remains stable, and you may continue with your plans. Itaka grinds his teeth. It's been a long time since he's felt this much anger. Since he's directed his hatred at something that isn't himself. I'm trapped, he says, and getting the words out is like speaking through concrete. He raises his hands, displaying the cuffs. Even if I agreed, how exactly do you expect? Danzo smiles. There's a silver key in his hand, a key that fits perfectly into the locks of the cuffs. Itaka narrows his eyes sharply. How did you get that? Not important. What matters is that I have it. The only thing keeping you here is the restraints preventing you from using your chakra. Take them off, and an escape will be easy for someone of your skills. Itaka says nothing. His nails scrape at the table, the polish on them chipping. You have two choices, Danzo says. Reveal the truth, but doom Konoha in the process. Or you can do what you do best, and keep this village safe at all costs. He drops the metal key on the table. Itaka stares at it, only inches away from his fingers. Once again, it's your call. Danzo stands up. With those last words, he exits the room. Itaka is left staring down at the table in front of him. His carefully constructed mask, perfect before the man entered, is now battered and full of cracks. His words run through Itaka's head, and they sink into his brain like a sickening poison. I think, if it meant keeping Konoha safe, then you would sacrifice anything. Even your precious little brother. Itaka bites his lip, tasting blood in his mouth. He feels nauseous. You did what you had to, he reminds himself. The only thing you could do. How many times has he had to say this to himself? Each time, it feels less like a rationale and more like a desperate self-assurance. If he is doing the right thing, then why does he have to keep repeating the words? Why is he haunted by a nagging sense of despair and self-doubt? He hates to admit it, refuses to, but sometimes, Itaka thinks that he's playing against himself. It's difficult to remain sure when he suspects that it's his own mistakes and flaws that are ensnaring him. That in trying to protect his brother, it's his own decisions that are driving him toward his downfall. He isn't sure he knows himself anymore, and it's terrifying. His hand reaches out, his fingers curling around the key. The metal bites into his palm. He feels oddly detached from himself, and he thinks faintly that there must have been a time when he did not view the world through such a specific lens. A time when the world didn't seem like an endless game of shogi with an invisible opponent. A time when he hesitated more, when he was much more conscious of his own morals. These days, Itaka finds himself all too readily crossing the black and white lines. And all too soon, the world seems less defined and more like an ambiguous, dark smudge of charcoal. Itaka thinks about Sasuke curled up in a corner, shaking like a leaf. The sound of sobbing coming from the other side of the door. He thinks about how badly he wishes he could take it back and then wonders if he actually would. If he was given the chance, would he really take it back? Would he really change anything? No, he realizes, and that's the most shameful truth of all. No, I wouldn't change a thing. That's the part that kills him, to realize that even if he had somehow foreseen this, Itaka knows he wouldn't have changed any of his decisions, wouldn't have played this any differently. From beginning to end, he would have moved his pieces exactly the same. He can't second-guess his choices. He doesn't have the luxury to. He's made so many sacrifices that he's become bound by them, obligated by the blood spilled to endure and see that everything will finally come to an end. Itaka turns his palm up, his eyes locked on the key in his hand. He's left with something that's not quite guilt and not quite regret, but something deeper and darker that unfurls its thorns inside him. He's left with decisions he wishes he never had to make, but cannot afford to take back. He did what? Jiraiya winces from Tsunade's loud exclamation. Went to visit Itaki at the prison. I followed him there. I thought about stopping him, but I decided to wait and see how it played out. And he just walked right in. Where the hell was Ibiki? He shakes his head. I don't know, I didn't see him. But he was only in the room for a few minutes. Tsunade lets out a growl. She slams her fist down onto the desk, causing it to shake. Damn that man. What is he up to? There are security tapes in the room, Jiraiya tells her. We can have them looked over. We might not be able to hear what they're saying, but... Get him in here, she demands, her fists shaking at her sides. I don't care if you have to drag him by the ankles, I want him in this office. There's a knock on the office door, and a shinobi in a mask steps into the room. Hokage-sama. Tsunade spins around. Not now. The Umbu member steps into the room anyway. But it's urgent. Fine, she says in a harsh voice, flicking her hair from her face as she turns to face the masked messenger. What is it? It's Itaki Uchiha. He's escaped. Chapter 24. Kakashi stares at her incredulously. What do you mean he's escaped? Tsunade clenches her jaw tight enough to hurt. What do you mean? What do I mean? He's escaped. I'm fairly certain there's only one way to interpret those words. I meant how? He was secured. Tsunade lets out a growl, pacing the length of floor in front of her desk. I don't know. But Danzo definitely had a hand in this. Kakashi's eye narrows sharply. Danzo? What does he have to do with this? Tsunade throws her hands up in the air, her anger rendering her momentarily incapable of speech. Beside her, Jiraiya explains, he went to visit Itaki, only moments before he broke out. It was only a few minutes ago, so we haven't looked at the surveillance footage yet. But there's no way it's a coincidence. Kakashi shakes his head. What was Danzo even doing visiting him? Tsunade bites her lip. She halts her pacing, spinning toward him. I need you to go after him, now. The Jounin blinks. Danzo. No, she tells him. Itaki. But you just said. He escaped the prison, she explains. But that was less than 5 minutes ago. He hasn't breached Konoha's barriers yet. I would have felt it if he did. Which means there's still time to catch up to him. Kakashi looks at her doubtfully. Even if that's true. The information in that man's head is invaluable. Tsunade declares, her nails digging sharply into her palms. I will not let him slip away now that he is finally in our grasp. Kakashi is still. Tsunade throws an impatient look at him. What are you still standing here for, she yells. Go after him. Kakashi goes. In a gust of wind and leaves, he's through the window and out of her office. Tsunade takes a deep breath, trying to calm down. She forces her fingers to uncurl, half-moon marks in her skin stinging. And you, she says, turning to Jiraiya. Get Danzo. But forget about bringing him to my office. I want him brought straight to an interrogation room. Jiraiya grimaces. He won't like that. I don't care, Tsunade snaps. And find Ibiki. Tell him to bring me those damn surveillance tapes. He has some serious explaining to do about how this managed to happen on his watch. Jiraiya makes a face, clearly not pitying the man soon to face Tsunade's ire. I'm on it, he says, and leaves the same way Kakashi left. Tsunade growls once her office is empty. In a burst of frustration, she slams her fist down on the surface of her desk. The wood splinters and breaks from the force. Damn that man. Kakashi knows he has no chance of catching Itachi. He knows, even as he races across the village, that it's a fool's errand. Itachi Uchiha will only be caught if he wants to be, that's the only reason they managed it in the first place. You can't lock up someone like Itachi. Not for long, at least. Still, fool's errand or not, Kakashi does as Tsunade bids him. Because she's the Hokage, and he has to obey her. Because Itachi is a valuable resource, and he doesn't want to lose him. Because he can't bear the thought of telling Sasuke his brother slipped their grasp. Kakashi moves faster. He doesn't bother trying to sense Itachi's chakra. In a different environment, he might be able to. But in the heart of the village, he'd have to be a sensory nin to pick up one specific signature among dozens. Instead, he bites down on his palm, drawing blood. A black summoning circle appears on the ground when he slams his hand down, and all 8 of his ninkin appear in front of him. Pakun, as usual, is settled on top of Bull's head. Boss, the pug greets him. He looks around, quickly determining their location. What's up? I need all of you to split up and track Itachi Uchiha, Kakashi orders them. You remember his scent, don't you? Pakun sniffs, raising his snout in the air in offense. Of course. You know I never forget a scent. Good, he says. It's been over 6 years since his ninkin have needed to track Itachi's scent back when he was still a member of Team Ro. You can come with me to sniff him out. The rest of you fan out in different directions. Let me know as soon as you catch a hint of anything. 7 of them immediately take off. Pakun trades his place on Bull's head for Kakashi's shoulder. So what's the situation? No time, Kakashi says. Just help me track him down. Before he makes it out of Konoha. Pakun is clearly confused about a lot of things. But he nods. Kakashi immediately turns himself toward the border of the village. He doesn't actually expect any of his ninja hounds will catch Itachi's scent, not until he's already long gone, at least, but he's going to try anyway. He's stopped by Naruto, the blonde calling out for him as he passes him on the street. Kakashi-sensei, he says. Hey, have you seen hey Pakun. How are you? Get lost, kid, Pakun says from Kakashi's shoulder. We're busy. Naruto makes an affronted face. Normally, Kakashi would chide the pug for being so rude, but he doesn't have the time at the moment. I'm sorry, Naruto, he says. But I really do have to go. His student frowns. He clearly reads something from Kakashi's face, because he quickly goes from offended to worried. What is it? Is something wrong? Is it Sasuke? Sasuke's fine. We'll talk later, okay. Kakashi leaves him behind, feeling vaguely guilty as he hears him yell after him. They've reached the boundaries of the village now, nearing the forest that surrounds it. Then, miraculously, Pakun says, I got something. It's him. Kakashi doesn't dare believe it. No, he doesn't believe it. It's too easy. Itachi should be long gone by now. Is he letting me catch up to him? He wonders. Whatever the reason, Kakashi follows the path Pakun directs him in. He catches up to him in a small clearing, surrounded by trees. Itachi looks back at him, his bangs blowing in his face in the breeze. He isn't surprised, it seems almost as if he's been waiting. Kakashi-san, he says, in that familiar flat tone. Don't bother trying to drag me back. You won't succeed, and we both know it. Kakashi-san, he calls him. So formal. So impersonal. Kakashi remembers the days that it used to be Kakashi-senpai. Pakun looks between the two of them worriedly. but Kakashi makes a gesture with his hand that the dog interprets easily. He nods his head, popping out of existence. Kakashi's gaze locks with blood-red eyes. You're right, he admits. I won't be able to capture you. Not unless you want me to. That's the only reason Jiraiya and I managed it before, isn't it? Itachi doesn't respond, but Kakashi doesn't need him to. He already knows the answer. He shakes his head at the man in front of him. No, not a man, a boy. Itachi Uchiha is 18 years old, and how quickly, how easily, people forget that. Even Kakashi is quick to forget, and he knew him back when he was still a foot shorter than him. You let us capture you in order to wake Sasuke up from the Tsukuyomi you trapped him in, he says. Which I'm assuming was a mistake, by the way you reacted when you were told. Kakashi remembers those red eyes, wide in shock, for just a singular moment, before the mask slammed back down. For all that Itachi wanted to hurt his brother, trapping him in a hell without escape hadn't been his intention. It makes no sense, he continues. You spare Sasuke's life over and over, even get yourself caught to help him, yet you torture him mercilessly. You say he is a mere tool to test your own abilities, but you show obvious interest in his own character. Every time you meet him, you make sure to remind him of his hatred for you, you throw your sins in his face to enrage him, to drive him to get better so. Kakashi stops. Saying the words out loud, speaking them, has allowed something to click into place. A light bulb goes off in his brain, and he stares at Itachi with realized understanding. Itachi narrows his eyes at the look. You want him to kill you? Kakashi says. Itachi freezes. Kakashi can feel his own brain process the information as so many things that never made sense suddenly connect. He reels, and then pins the Akatsuki member with an accusing gaze. It's true. You've ensured that Sasuke seeks power, ensured his hatred for you, also that he will one day become your slayer. This is your twisted notion of justice, isn't it? As punishment for killing the entire Uchiha clan, you plan to lose your life at the hands of its last living member. Itachi remains silent. Kakashi feels his hands shake, curling into fists. Anger hits him. Anger at this man in front of him, whom he once thought he knew. Anger that his student was forced to suffer through such pain, and all of it for this. Kakashi thinks of Sasuke trapped in the genjutsu, curled up in a ball in the corner of his parents' room. This? It was all for this? He shakes his head. You have no idea what you're doing, he yells. This is selfish, a pathetic way of settling your own debt, running away from your demons. For once in your life, think of your brother. Kakashi doesn't even see him move. Itachi is standing across the clearing, and suddenly, Kakashi is being yanked forward. Itachi's hands are locked around the collar of his vest, and the calm within his eyes has shattered. My brother is all I think of. It's impossible to forget that Itachi is Sasuke's brother. But the resemblance has never been more striking as it is now, with his red eyes blazing and his mouth set in a snarl. Kakashi has seen fury on Sasuke Uchiha numerous times. He's never seen it on Itachi. You know nothing, he says, and his hands gripping Kakashi's collar are shaking. You understand nothing. Kakashi is oddly transfixed by the sight the legendary Itachi Uchiha, clinging to the remnants that remain of his composure. What caused this? He wonders. Kakashi isn't so arrogant as to believe it was his own words. He remembers what Tsunade said about Danzo visiting Itachi just before he escaped. Something the man said rattled Itachi, rattled him enough to send him immediately running for the hills. Itachi looks down at his hands gripping Kakashi's collar as if just realizing they were there. He drops them, stepping back to a respectable distance. Everything I've ever done has been for him. Everything. His voice sounds almost like he's trying to convince himself. Kakashi's never seen those eyes anything but calm. Now, there's an unhinged, almost fragile quality to them he's never seen. Like a pane of glass with cracks spider webbing outward, and the slightest pressure will cause it to shatter. And Kakashi feels something like fear shoot up his spine as he looks into those eyes. What could Danzo have possibly done? What could he have possibly said to strip Itachi's veneer so thin? Kakashi keeps his gaze steady, refusing to flinch away from those eyes, no matter how much instinct screams at him to. If that's true, then come back. Stop running. This isn't going to help Sasuke. It's only going to hurt him. Itachi seems to regain some of his previous composure. His eyes still burn crimson, but the cracks in them seem to have mended. Or, more likely, have been covered up. I've already hurt him, he says, his tone impassive. I can't do any worse. You can always do worse. Kakashi doesn't know what he can do. He doesn't understand Itachi Uchiha. He never has. But he understands Sasuke, understands exactly how Itachi's actions will impact him. You're that kid's entire world, Kakashi says. Whether it's because he loves you or because he hates you, you're all there is for him. If you force him to kill you, there won't be an after. It'll break him. The muscles in Itachi's jaw tighten. His eyes flicker away from Kakashi's, but not before Kakashi spots the conflict within them. Take care of him, he says. Kakashi wants to stop him to keep him from leaving. But he knows nothing he does will make a difference. I will, he replies. But I'm not doing it for you. Itachi's lips curve up into something that's almost a smile. His body explodes in a flock of crows, disappearing in a whirl of black feathers. Sasuke's ears are ringing. The world is fuzzy and distant, and he can't seem to touch any of it. What do you mean, he escaped? Kakashi is standing in front of him, but the words he has spoken refuse to penetrate Sasuke's brain. Instead, they float in the air in front of him, refusing to make sense. Sasuke stares at his sensei, and the room seems to float away from him. He feels he's outside of his own body. He tries repeating the words to himself, tries to make them real. Itachi has escaped. He's gone, Kakashi says. He got free. We don't know how. I caught up to him, but... I'm sorry, Sasuke. Sasuke feels like he's living in two spaces at once, the two spaces refusing to merge. He knows he's standing in the hospital room, but he can't feel the ground beneath him. The world is separate, untouchable, unreal. Kakashi's face blurs in front of him. Sasuke wonders if he's breathing. He must be. You're nothing to me. Itachi has escaped. Except he can't have escaped, he can't, because Sasuke just saw him, not even 2 hours ago. He sat across from him, staring into his eyes, hearing his voice, listening to him. Not even 2 hours ago he was close enough to touch, sitting there with that cold look on his face. He was right there. You're nothing to me. And now Itachi is gone. You're nothing to me. Sasuke's vision goes white. Blood roars in his ears, and there's a loud crack, and pain erupts in his hand. Sasuke. Sasuke comes back to himself, the world rushing in again. His hand is half trapped in the hospital wall, the plaster around it cracked and crumbling. He doesn't even remember throwing the punch. Sasuke sucks in a sharp breath as the pain hits him. The bones in his hand feel shattered. Kakashi is by his side immediately, a wide-eyed look on his face. Geez, kid. Okay, it's fine, you're fine. Sasuke is shaking. His hand fucking hurts. Kakashi tries to help him free it from the wall, pieces of crumbling plaster scrape against his skin as he twists his fist, and a quiet whimper escapes his lips. His fist is pulled free. His knuckles are bloody and scraped, trailing crimson down the rest of his hand. Sasuke tries to flex his fingers, and pain immediately shoots up his arm. His face twists. His anger flees him as fast as it came. A half-second of blackout rage, and now he feels empty. Hollow. He has no strength to stand, to speak. His eyes feel gritty as he sinks to the floor. Kakashi follows him down. Here, he says softly. Let me see. Sasuke has no energy to respond. He allows Kakashi to gently pull his injured hand closer to him. He examines it closely with a frown, and his thumb brushes slightly against Sasuke's scraped knuckles. Sasuke hisses, but he clings to the feeling. The pain slices through the haze in his brain, turns the world momentarily sharp again. You've shattered your knuckles, his sensei tells him, a touch of disapproval to his voice. He presses a tissue against his knuckles, his grip tightening when Sasuke instinctively tries to jerk away. Keep this pressed against them. And don't try to move your fingers. I'm sorry, Sasuke says quietly. Kakashi shakes his head. Don't be. You've got nothing to apologize for. Sasuke feels a pressure behind his eyes, like he wants to cry. But no tears come, he's already used them all up. Pressed with his back against the door of Itachi's cell, he sobbed his heart out, until his throat was raw and his voice was hoarse. Now, Sasuke shakes on the floor of the hospital. He has no more tears left to shed. Kakashi is sitting closer to him than Sasuke can ever remember him being. His gaze is sad, and his hand reaches out, brushing Sasuke's hair gently from his forehead. This isn't over, he says. We'll find him, Sasuke. Sasuke smiles bitterly. No. You won't. Chapter 25. The next morning, Danzo Shimura is sitting in the same interrogation room previously occupied by Itachi Uchiha. Across from him, Tsunade sits with her hands folded in front of her. I warned you, Tsunade, Danzo says. You should have killed Itachi as soon as he was in your grasp. He has cooperated willing, and so he is not bound in chains. His hands are free, settled in a position identical to hers. Tsunade's jaw tightens at the words. You know very well why I kept him alive. Just as you know very well that this mess is your doing. Do you take me for a fool? Ibiki was not on duty when Danzo snuck into the prison for a chat with their highest security prisoner. None of the intelligence operatives working at the time had seen him, and the security tape from the room had been mysteriously wiped. But Jiraiya clearly witnessed him entering the building. You visited Itachi Uchiha here, in this room, less than an hour before he made his escape, Tsunade says. Did you truly believe you wouldn't be suspected of aiding him in some way? Danzo leans back in his chair, crossing his arms across his chest. Is paying a visit to a prisoner really enough to cast suspicion upon me? Sasuke Uchiha paid him a visit just before I did. Is he being interrogated as well? She blinks in surprise, her anger disappearing for a moment. Sasuke visited him? How do you know this? I caught him running from the building just as I got there, and I assumed it was his brother he was there for. The poor boy looked quite distraught. Tsunade processes this information with a frown. Due to the security footage being wiped, she hadn't known of any other visitors to attack his cell block that day. That damn brat, she specifically forbade him from going there. Are you really surprised he disobeyed? Tsunade sighs. No, she really isn't. She'll need to talk to the boy sometime after this. And to tell Kakashi to keep a better eye on his students. All three of them are sneaking into places they shouldn't be. You were the last person to see him before he bolted. Just before he bolted. And you have a motive for setting him free. You were against trying to capture him from the start. I was against trying to capture him alive, yes, says Danzo. It was too much of a risk, as has now been proven. And you were gambling the lives of two of Konoha's most powerful shinobi. Many lives have been gambled for less, Tsunade replies. You've gambled many lives for less. It seems to me that you're trying to hide something. What would I have to hide? If I knew that, then we wouldn't be here, would we? Danzo doesn't respond to these words. He seems unerringly calm, despite the position he's in. He's always been a man who has acted like the world is his privilege, like everyone else is expected to step out of his way wherever he walks, and Tsunade has always despised him for this attitude. He was her sensei's teammate and comrade, and she understands his reasons for keeping him around. But most of the time, she wonders if it's worth it. I know you and Itachi have history with each other, she says. You authorized his promotion to Umbu captain at 12. The document has your signature on it. I remember appointing him, Danzo replies easily. It was a bit of a special case, him being so young. But I promoted many Umbu members while supervising the division with Hiruzen. I'm aware of this, she says. However, your power in Umbu only applied to the operatives working under you. Itachi Uchiha was never a part of your foundation. He was a member of Team Ro, a squad working directly under the Hokage. The decision to promote Itachi should have been his, not yours. The man's mouth thins slightly. It's true that Itachi was never a part of the foundation. However, his skill set was unique and invaluable. Hiruzen often lent him out to me for certain missions. I went through his file. I didn't see any mission assignments that were given by you. Some missions are too classified to put down on paper, Danzo tells her, a tone of scorn in his voice. I know you are only recently Hokage, but surely you are aware of this. Some assignments are known only to the elders and the current Hokage. Once they are done, they no longer exist. Tsunade knows this to be true. She may not have ever been Umbu herself, but she knows the type of work employed by its operatives. Shinobi who carry out their missions from the shadows, bloody deeds that never see the light of day. But this isn't what her mind latches onto. Danzo has revealed more than he seems to think with his words. Missions too classified to put on paper. Could it be? Tsunade thinks back to Itaka's words, during her first visit to his interrogation room. It had seemed like a pointless, throwaway remark. Konoha doesn't perform executions anymore. Not publicly. There's a dark suspicion building in her gut, when she considers that the words might have actually held meaning, and she prays that she's wrong. Because if she's anywhere even close to right. Now, Tsunade, Danzo says. Do you have anything to actually charge me with, or am I to sit here and listen to baseless accusations? Tsunade locks her jaw, her clasped hands tightening, nails pressing into her skin. She doesn't have anything she can actually hold him for. All the evidence against him is circumstantial. Without something solid, she can't give authorization for Inoichi to get into his head. She can't keep him here for too long without proper evidence of something. Which means she needs to find something, fast, before the wily old fox slips through her fingers again. She stands from her chair. Get comfortable, she tells him, ignoring his question. Because I'm not letting you get out of this one. She walks from the room, letting the door shut with a heavy thud behind her. She walks down the halls, turning a corner into the room where Ibiki is sitting, attempting to recover the missing security footage. He's sitting in front of the screen, watching live footage of Danzo in the room she just left. Tsunade stares down at his image, her lip curling. You saw all of that? I did, Ibiki says. I was able to read his lips well enough. A whole lot of nothing, huh? Actually, he gave me more than he meant to, Tsunade says. Ibiki raises an eyebrow, but before he can ask, she cuts him off. Why the hell didn't you tell me Sasuke Uchiha visited Itake? Were you off duty then too? Ibiki winces. No. I was there when he came by. I allowed him into the room. I thought he might be able to get Itake to let something slip. And he did. I was on my way to tell you when the escape happened. The scarred man makes an irritated face, his lips twisting. He's already harshly punished the subordinates who were working in his place at the time. He did. Tsunade says in surprise. Itake revealed something. Nothing about the Akatsuki. But the kid figured out that someone else helped Itake massacre his clan, another Uchiha. Itake confirmed it. Another Uchiha? Did he say who it was? No. Ibiki hesitates for a moment, a troubled expression coming over his face. But when Inoichi was attempting to get into his mind, Itake locked him out almost completely, but he did let a single name slip. A name. Tsunade repeats. The look on Ibiki's face causes dread to curl up her spine. What name? Madara. Are you sure about this? Kakashi asks. Sasuke scowls from the hospital bed. His right hand is gripping a pen awkwardly, his left useless against the mattress. The release papers are settled on his lap, as he ignores his sensei's disapproval. I can't stand this place, he says. The smell of it makes me sick. I just want to go home. He struggles to hold the pen correctly in his non-dominant hand, experiencing a surge of helpless frustration. He signs his name messily on the page, and his signature is barely legible. His scowl deepens. Stupid injured hand. Sasuke's left hand is wrapped in bandages. In punching the hospital wall yesterday, he managed to shatter 3 of his knuckles and break 2 of his fingers. This has caused him endless frustration, due to the fact that he's left-handed, and Tsunade has refused to heal the injury. It can heal the normal way, she told him. Consider it payment for punching a hole through the hospital wall. How about you heal me, and I'll consider it payment for letting Itake fucking escape, he snapped back at her viciously. She didn't appreciate that comment. Sasuke didn't really fucking care. Sasuke, Kakashi says, his visible eye curved down. I can't approve of you signing yourself out so soon. I certainly can't approve of you going back to that house. Not after what you've just been through. That's why I'm signing myself out, he says. It's not your decision, and I don't need your permission. Kakashi sighs in displeasure. He sits down on the edge of the bed, causing Sasuke to frown. Fine. I understand wanting to get out of here. The hospital definitely isn't my favorite place, either. But going back to the Uchiha district? That's a bad idea, and you know it. Sasuke's hand shakes slightly around his pen, as he sees the image of it in his mind. The compound's streets, littered in bodies. Slipping in blood, you're not even worth killing. He takes a shaky breath and grips the pen tightly. I'll be fine. It's my home. Yes, the Jounin says. It is. It's also the place where your family was killed, which you spent 13 days reliving. Going back there isn't going to help you recover. I don't need to recover. Sasuke snaps, his eyes snapping up. It's over. I'm fine. Red eyes, spinning, spinning, spinning. His mother's fingers reaching toward him, a hand around his throat. You're nothing to me. Sasuke stands abruptly. The expression on Kakashi's face looks overwhelmingly like pity, and it makes him want to hit something. It makes him want to punch another wall. I'll be fine, he repeats, in a calmer voice. Home is better. It's this place that's killing me. He grips the release form in his hand to take down to the front desk. Kakashi seems to accept that he isn't going to be able to stop him, not without using force, because his shoulders drop in resignation. Fine, he says, standing from the bed. If that's really what you want. But you know where I live. If it's too much, if you need somewhere else to stay. I won't. If you do. Sasuke hesitates, glancing up at his sensei. If I do. Kakashi's face relaxes slightly. He passes Sasuke, opening the door and holding it open for him. By the way, I'm resuming training with Naruto and Sakura tomorrow. The usual place. You don't have to come, but if you want to. I'll be there, Sasuke says. Kakashi's eye curves up in a smile. Good. They've missed you, you know. Sasuke doesn't respond. But in the silence of his mind, he admits he misses them too. Half an hour after the shocking revelation of the name Madara Uchiha impossible, Tsunade's brain tells her, he must have heard wrong. She stands in front of Konoha's two elders, staring them down fiercely. You heard me, Tsunade repeats, after they've expressed their shock at her demand. Itake. The Uchiha massacre. I want you to tell me about it. The parts that didn't get put in the file. Koharu and Homura share a look. The emotion in their eyes is impossible to characterize as anything other than fear. Danzo said that some missions are too dangerous to write down. He also claimed that these missions are known to only the current Hokage and the elders. Sarutobi may be dead, and Danzo may have stitched his lips, but there's still one more source she can exploit. And judging by the expressions on their faces, she's finally hit gold. Homura shakes his head. Tsunade-heim, I'm afraid we don't know what you're speaking of. Do not bullshit me, she snaps. Her fist hits the table in front of her, causing a crack to go through the wood. I have had it up to here with bullshit answers. What I'm looking for is the truth. Both of them flinch beneath the focus of her dangerous temper. Her head is still ringing with the unbelievable name Madara, and her tolerance for duplicity has gone out the window. She is one lie away from grabbing them and shaking the answers from them. She wonders if that might give them a heart attack. They're certainly old enough for it to be a concern. I have Danzo locked up in an interrogation room right now, she says, and relishes in the twin looks of horror that pass over their faces. Inoichi is going to dig into his mind and rip out every single dirty secret, so if you wish for a chance to explain yourselves before then, I suggest you start talking. It's a bluff. Legally, ethically, she has no proof to give Inoichi the license to invade Danzo's mind without his consent. But they don't need to know that. She can see the war going on in their eyes. What to choose? Keep their silence, and allow themselves to be implicated in whatever crimes Danzo's mind reveals. Or spill the truth now, and spin it in a way that looks better for themselves? For a long moment, they look at each other. Slowly, Koharu nods. Homura lets out a resigned sigh, his eyes closing. It's a long explanation, he says. But there's one thing, above all else, that you have to understand. Tsunade gazes at the two of them coldly. And what's that? The Uchiha clan had to die. And Itachi Uchiha had to be the one to do it. Eventually, Sasuke makes his way to the Uchiha district, located at the edge of the village. The sun is blotted out by heavy clouds, looming with the threat of rain. He stops at the gates of the compound, as an icy feeling washes over him. He doesn't move. The last time I entered this place. Bodies in the streets. The ground smeared with blood. Weapons littered everywhere. Death, the sight of it, the smell of it, the taste of it. No, Sasuke reminds himself, forcing the images back. That wasn't the last time I was here. That was 5 years ago. It used to feel like 5 years ago. Time had begun to blur the memories. But Itachi's Tsukuyomi brought it all back, and now it feels like yesterday. Sasuke steadies his shaking hands. He forces his feeling of fear down. The irrational belief that Itachi is still inside, still waiting, still ready to finish off the job, still ready to look down at him and call him foolish little brother. Sasuke shoves the gates open and steps inside. His vision flickers. Empty streets and houses are bathed in a red hue. There are bodies on the ground, their expressions twisted, frozen, mangled. The thick scent of blood invades his nose. The clouds in the sky darken the bright afternoon, creating the illusion of evening. The windows of the houses are shattered, doors hanging off their hinges. And above him, there's a familiar silhouette sitting atop the tallest building. Foolish little brother. He gags on the metallic taste in the back of his throat, wires of steel constricting his heart. Familiar faces run past him, screaming, 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 and Itachi's eyes are bleeding the same color as the moon, and his mother is reaching out with 2 fingers. The pattern in Itachi's eyes is twisting. Foolish little brother. Sasuke falls to his knees. The impact travels through him, and he's kneeling in blood. His hands are covered in it, and he bows his head to the ground, trying to breathe. How does he breathe? His chest cracks right down the middle, and he lets out a whimper, an awful, choked sound of anguish. His mother's fingers are reaching, blood gushing from her gaping throat. Sasuke-kun. He squeezes his eyes closed. There's nothing left inside of him, just this terrible pain, and everything in him is screaming desperately. Foolish little brother. A raindrop hits his forehead, followed by another. They slip down his face, to his lips. The water tastes like blood. Itachi's fingers are pressing bruises against his throat. You're not even worth killing. The sky opens up and pours down on him. A few hours after leaving the hospital, there's a knock on Kakashi's apartment door. Kakashi opens it. Sasuke is standing in the hall outside his door, soaking wet from the rain pouring down outside. Water drips from him, creating a puddle on the floor. Sasuke. Sasuke's hair hangs limply in his face, his gaze locked on his feet. His arms are wrapped around himself, and he's shaking like a leaf. At the sound of his name, he raises his head. There are ghosts in his eyes. You were right, Sasuke whispers. I couldn't. Kakashi looks at him in quiet understanding. He doesn't ask for an explanation, he doesn't need one. Everything he needs to know is written clearly across the trembling boy's face. He opens the door wider and lets his student step inside out of the rain. Check the description for the links to the author.